Hello, good morning, and welcome. We're still getting people coming in, so we won't sort of really start for a few minutes. But just a few points, if I may. Apologies from Dudley. Dudley's actually working at the NEC today and may well be joining us for part of the meeting, but for only part of the meeting. Can I ask if there are any dom care agencies with us this morning? And particularly if what I want to know is because of the
yes, please.
Okay, great stuff. With regard to the fuel situation at the moment, have any local authorities offered to give you any more money to help help with the cost of fuel?
No, and I'm in Camden.
Right. So have you, I mean, we know that one or two local authorities are providing extra funding, but we're just trying to find out which ones are and which ones are not. And it seems at the moment that pretty much everybody in London isn't.
No.
I'm from United Response, haven't received anything, actually, even a message that it is available.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
I'm from United Response. We're supporting people in Richmond mainly and Kingston. I haven't received any message regarding this so far.
Okay, and
Kingston here.
Okay,
Kingston here. I second that.
Okay, and presumably some of you've actually asked
and
made the point.
And I'm Fumi from Dominion Care. I've not even I'm in Camden, and I haven't received any message regarding that from Camden.
Okay. I mean, I get the impression that I've talked to quite a few DCAs and clearly people are struggling. And it wouldn't surprise me if some of the DCAs actually cease to trade because it's getting very, very difficult.
Yeah.
You know, on top of the fact that you've obviously got a problem with staff recruitment, you know, low fees, fuel prices, everything seems to be a bit of a crisis at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So just taking that forward, you know, asking the question with regard to fee rises for this financial year, what level of fee rises have you had across the boroughs? I mean, I've heard talk of no fee rises, 3.5%, 8%. You know, how are you doing with fee rises?
2%.
4%, yeah.
2%.
2%.
1, 2.
Okay. Right. Any other fantastic increases?
4%.
Okay. What about fair price for care exercises? That's rolling out across all providers, you know, whether they're dom care or residential. Have anybody been asked to do exercises on that?
No.
Right. So have any?
Yes, we received one.
Okay, great stuff. And have you done it?
Not yet. It's on our work plan.
Okay. And have you been offered any funding to complete that?
Not that I'm aware.
Okay. Some local authorities again have offered small amounts of funding because it takes, you know, a couple of hours plus to actually do that.
Sorry, Peter. Sorry to cut in, Peter. I'm in Lambeth.
Yeah.
Nothing has been said on fuel, but we've been told to complete the fair cost of care, and it is taking so much time. It is complicated. They've offered nothing in forms of maybe funding or support, but they do want us to fill it and give it to them.
Okay. Okay. We did try and we did actually talk. LCAS had a meeting with a group of South East London local authorities, and we did offer to offer them some support, which obviously we would have needed paying for, and we did suggest that people, you know, it would be helpful if they paid people to actually do this because it takes quite a lot of time. It doesn't seem to have got anywhere. If they're using the documentation from Care Cubed or IESE, it's actually very useful to your business to actually fill that in. It's a historic set of documentation when you've completed it, but you can then project forward And that will be useful for your business, because if you're looking at the way inflation is going at the moment, we are looking at something like 11% by the end of the year. And we still have a big shortage of staff, not just in social care, but also in health, in hospitality, etc. So on that basis, the competition for staff is not going to get any easier. And certainly talking to a lady that had left social care recently and gone to work for a supermarket, she didn't like the job, but it suited her better. She got slightly more money, but she got a discount on her groceries. And that was the equivalent of a 7% pay rise.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a very competitive market out there. And, you know, there are various things you can do to try and help recruitment, support recruitment, but it is very difficult if local authorities are not giving you, you know, a reasonable uplift or a reasonable fee in the first place. Sorry, that's a bit of a miserable start to the meeting, but you know, unfortunately, we can't do a lot about it. At the last meeting, Susan Elwick was with us from the DH and has taken a number of questions away to answer. The likelihood is that we'll have the answers to those by the end of this week, which we'll circulate either through the website and also through WhatsApp. Some of the questions that were asked, I have some sympathy with her because they're not the sort of thing that the DH will be able to answer. One or two of them have been forwarded to CQC and we've asked them for a response. Again, we'll share those. But there were a number of points raised about employing overseas workers, getting references, DBS's. Now, we have with us this morning, or will have us with this morning, Karen and Rehal from the DBS, who may be able to answer some of those questions. But there is also a knock on to the DH. And we've asked them and also CQC if they can give us some guidance on this, which we will forward. Before we see that Kiran Rehal is just joining us from the DBS body, I will put a number of things in the chat for you to follow up during the meeting or after the meeting. And if you've got any points, then please do either raise them in the chat. If you want to contact me or Dudley, again, I will put our contact details in the chat. We get an awful lot of queries. We obviously try and help, but there are some things we can't answer. And if you're looking for help, we get a lot of people wanting us to help with things like tender documentation. That's very difficult, but we will see what we can do. So do please contact us. Right, good morning, Kiran. I see that you've arrived.
Morning, Peter. Good morning, everyone.
Do you have a presentation?
I do, so I will.
Okay, I will share the screen with you, and so that you should be able to. I
think it's working.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, without further ado, we have Karen Rehal from the Disclosure and Barring Service.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me, inviting me to your forum meeting today. It's really good to be here. So my name is Kiran Rehal, and I am one of the DBS Regional Outreach Advisors. And the region I cover is Greater London. So of course that covers all of you here today. And essentially I'm a point of contact for anything to do with the DBS. So what I thought it might be good to do is obviously give you a little bit of an introduction to the DBS initially, and talk about a few of our services that we provide. And then I'll talk to you a little bit more about the support I can offer. And if anyone has any questions after that, then by all means, I am happy to answer them. So I hope that's all okay with everybody. But we'll go straight into things, because I know obviously you've got quite a lot on your agenda as well. Oh, sorry, I should go back to slideshow first. Can everyone see that okay? Yep, hopefully everyone should be okay. And see the screen okay? Is that all right? Yeah, brilliant. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so yeah, so a little bit of an introduction to the DBS. So obviously when it comes to recruiting people to work in a roles that obviously you are all well aware of, those caring roles, working with vulnerable groups. Those are our vulnerable adults and children. When we are recruiting people to work with them, we want to make sure that those people that we are recruiting are safe to do so from a safeguarding perspective, that there's nothing there in terms of any criminal history or information that would lead an employer to consider otherwise employing them. So we want to make sure that there's no concerns there, and that the people that we support are going to be safe when they're in the care of those particular individuals. And essentially that is why the DBS exists. So the purpose of the DBS is to protect the public by helping employers make those safer recruitment decisions, and by barring those individuals who pose a risk to vulnerable groups from working in certain roles. So the DBS aims to make sure that employers have all the necessary information available to them to help them make those suitability decisions. And we do those through our DBS certificates that we send out to those individuals. And then the DBS can then legally take the next steps to legally bar an individual if they do pose a risk. And this is all in the aim of supporting the DBS vision, which is about making recruitment safer. So in 2025, we launched our 5-year strategy, and this details our key ambitions for the next 5 years. The main things we want to focus on is our profile, our quality, and our people. So the DBS wants to be seen as a visible, trusted, and influential organisation that provides an outstanding quality of service to all our customers and partners. And we believe that the delivery of this strategy will help us to improve our services, develop as an organisation, and support the contribution we make to the safeguarding community. And if anyone is interested in learning more about our DBS strategy, it is available on government websites. So where exactly in this very complex safeguarding environment does the DBS fit in? So if we have our safeguarding environment, and in the heart of our safeguarding environment, we have those vulnerable groups. So these are those vulnerable adults and children that we are looking to support and protect. Next, we have those frontline workers and volunteers. So these are the people whose work will frequently bring them into contact with those children and vulnerable adults. They have a responsibility to prevent and report any suspected abuse and neglect, and to make sure that the right actions are taken to protect vulnerable people. They also provide support to victims and their families. And these frontline professionals will include doctors, nurses, social care workers, care home workers, anyone who has direct involvement with those vulnerable groups will be those frontline workers who play a very big part in that safeguarding environment. Next, we have those managers and employers of those frontline professionals. So they may deal with the aftermath of any abuse or neglect, and they can offer long-term support to victims and their families. So this will include organisations such as the local authorities, the NSPCC, housing associations, education services, safeguarding partnership boards, CQC, sorry, not CQC, they come out next. But those organisations that are employing those people to provide those services and roles. And then finally, we have those regulatory bodies and government organisations. Now, these are those larger organisations that help prevent those who pose a risk to vulnerable groups from getting the kind of access that could lead to abuse and neglect. And these organisations include the CQC, Care Quality Commission, the courts, the National Probation Services, Ofsted, and the Disclosure and Barring Service. So this is also where we fit in as well, because our role is to make sure that those people who are unsuitable for working with particular groups are prevented from doing so by making sure that those employers have all the necessary information available to help them make those suitability decisions. So by providing all that essential information on a DBS certificate, that employer can obviously take on board what information is on that DBS certificate. And if the information is quite clear and evident that this person should not be working with vulnerable groups, then that employer can make that decision there and then as well. So that is where the DBS fits in, and we're a small but vital element of that safeguarding environment. And just to say, obviously, abuse isn't always obvious, but where organisations work together and when the right information is shared, it does make it harder for those abusers to gain access to vulnerable groups. So just to, obviously, it is about all of us working together and making sure we're sharing the right information. So obviously, I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with the different levels of DBS checks that we have, but I thought it might be handy to go through them all as well. So we have 4 different levels of DBS checks, and the reason we have different levels of DBS checks is because all roles are different, and not all roles will be working with vulnerable groups and vulnerable adults. So we make sure that there's a different level of DBS check for for those all different types of roles. And obviously the information that is disclosed on that role, on that individual, sorry, is specifically for the employer or the manager's eyes, basically, because they are the ones who are making the suitability decisions. But let's have a look at these different types of checks. So for a basic DBS check, this will disclose any unspent convictions and conditional cautions. There are no restrictions as to who can access a basic DBS check. Anybody can access a basic DBS check. And sometimes for some organizations, if they can't access any other level of DBS check, they will still always apply for a basic DBS check out of good practice, because there are no restrictions as to who can access it. So that's our basic DBS check, and that's our lowest level of check. And that can be applied for obviously through an umbrella body, but it can also be applied for on our government website. So anyone can go directly onto the DBS government website and make their own basic DBS check if that is what they needed to do. Next, we have the standard DBS check. Now, this will disclose any spent and unspent convictions and cautions subject to filtering. So for a standard DBS check, this is for those roles that have been named in legislation as being eligible for a standard DBS check. So these are very specific roles. So examples of these include roles in the legal sector, roles in the finance sector, veterinary surgeons, locksmiths, football stewards. That's just an example of some of them, but as you can tell, there's, they almost sound very random, but they are very specific roles that have been named as being eligible for a standard DBS check. And unless you were looking to employ somebody to carry out one of those very specific roles, you would not be able to access a standard DBS check. So standard DBS checks, very, very specific as to who can access it, and they are for specific roles that are named in legislation. Next, we have the enhanced DBS check. Now, this will disclose any spent and unspent convictions and cautions subject to filtering. So the information we receive about spent and unspent convictions and cautions all comes from the police national computer. The difference with the enhanced check and above is this is also where relevant police intelligence also plays a big part as well. So if there is any information on an individual that a chief police officer feels is relevant to the role they are looking to work, or the role they've applied for, or the workforce they're looking to work within, and by workforce I mean whether that's with adults or with children, then that chief police officer can include information on that individual. So for an enhanced DBS check, in order to be able to access it, you are looking at roles that are working with children and working with adults. And that's why that extra police intelligence can be really, really important, especially if you're looking at some situations where an individual may not have received a conviction or a caution for something that they may have done. However, if the police still hold information about that particular incident and they feel it's relevant to the role or the workforce that's being applied for, then they can still choose to include that information on a DBS certificate, even though that individual didn't receive a conviction or a caution for anything. So that's why you can see the importance of that when we are looking at those roles that are working with vulnerable groups. We want to make sure we have as much information as we can do so we can make those suitability decisions. And then finally, we have the enhanced barred list DBS check. Now, this is exactly the same as the enhanced check, but here you will also be able to see if that person is either on the children's and or adults barred list. In order to be able to access this particular level of check, you are looking at roles that are called regulated activity, and that's not something I'm going to go into today, but if anyone does have further questions on it, I'll be happy to answer it, or after the session. But in order to be able to access the highest level of check, you have to be in regulated activity, and that's because regulated activity is something that a barred person cannot do. So if somebody is on the barred list, they are not allowed to engage in regulated activity, and that is why that is our highest level of check. So essentially, if you are applying for an enhanced DBS with a barred list check, then you are looking at employing somebody to work in regulated activity, and if the information comes back that that person is on the barred list, then they cannot work in regulated activity. It would be a criminal offence for them to do so, and that's the benefit of that DBS check. And obviously, in order for somebody to be placed on the barred list, and obviously there are serious safeguarding concerns about that individual working with that particular workforce. So that's why it is so important that these checks are carried out at the right level and that the role is looked at, and there's a full understanding of what is expected there. So those are our different levels of DBS checks. The standard, enhanced and enhanced with barred list check are free for volunteers, but because there are no requirements as to who can access a basic DBS check, even for volunteers who wanted to access a basic DBS check, they would have to pay as well. So just a little bit of extra information there. But I hope that's been useful to know. Next, I just wanted to mention the update service. So often at the DBS, we would get asked once a person has received their DBS certificate and they've been employed, how as an employer or a manager would we ever know if something's changed on their DBS certificate? If new information became available, how as an employer would we ever find out about that? I mean, the reality is obviously the DBS is never going to inform that employer about any changes like that. So the onus is on the employer to carry out those regular checks. But the update service is our online subscription service. And essentially it means that an individual can subscribe, can register their DBS certificate online with the update service. It costs £13 a year for paid staff members, and it is free for volunteers. But once they've registered their DBS certificate with the update service, they can carry out checks as often as they need to, and they can also give permission for their employer or their manager to also carry out those checks as often as they need to make sure that the information on the DBS certificate is still valid and still correct. So essentially, rather than having to apply for a brand new DBS certificate every 2 years, 3 years, or however often it is, the employer can just go online, as long as they have the individual's consent to do so, they can check to see if the information on the certificate is still valid and still up to date since the date the certificate was issued. So this means obviously for a lot of organised employers as well, sometimes you may have somebody who comes into your service that may already have a DBS certificate. So if you're looking to employ somebody who needs an enhanced DBS with the adults barred list check, and they come to you and they say, well, I already have that DBS certificate at that level and for that workforce, and it's registered with the update service, then that means you could essentially use the update service to see if there's anything new on, or anything has changed on the DBS certificate. And if it hasn't, then essentially you are able to use that DBS certificate without having to apply for a brand new one. So with the update service, it will never disclose any information in terms of any conviction history or anything. It will never disclose any of that. It only gives you a status update. So it could tell you that no new information exists or no relevant information, which essentially means that there's no new information from the Police National Computer or from Police Intelligence, and therefore that certificate is still valid and still correct. You could be told that new information exists, which essentially means that there is new information on the DBS certificate. And if that does happen, then it would be good practice to speak to the employee and let them know that you will be submitting a new DBS check to see what that information is. So it will just only ever tell you a status update. And if you're told there's no record of the certificate in the service, then that essentially means that either the individual hasn't given you the right login details, or maybe they haven't kept up with their payment, annual payment subscription. So the benefits of the DBS update service is obviously that you can check as often as you need to, especially for those organisations that will be carrying out regular rechecks. It is certainly a lot quicker to find out whether a DBS certificate is still valid and still correct, rather than having to apply for a brand new one. With the update service, it will check against the Police National Computer and the Police National Computer and barred list information on a weekly basis, and it will check against any police intelligence every 9 months. So certainly if you're an organisation that carried out those regular rechecks or renewals, that information will constantly be updated. So that's our DBS update service. Another thing I just want to quickly mention is barring. So obviously, a big part of what we do is the barring part of the DBS. So this is where individuals will be referred to the DBS, either from employers, agencies, keepers of registrars, or sometimes they come through our auto bar route, where they may have received a conviction or caution, which means they are automatically being considered for barring. But essentially the DBS receives these referrals, and then the DBS looks to see if those individuals should be placed on the barred list or not. And as I mentioned, if somebody is placed on the barred list, then that means that they are not allowed to engage in regulated activity, and that's why they are on the barred list. So, but often we are asked, when should a referral should be made to the DBS? So this is when two main conditions have been met. So the first condition is that you have withdrawn permission for that individual to engage in regulated activity. So that could be through a dismissal, they've been redeployed, retired, made redundant, or resigned themselves. And the second condition is that you believe that the person has either engaged in relevant conduct, satisfied the harm test, or received a caution or a conviction for a relevant offence. So if we break these down a little bit, essentially, if you have removed somebody from regulated activity, and that's, if you've dismissed them, then obviously they've done something serious enough for you to dismiss them, and therefore that legal condition would have been met. If you redeployed somebody to another area of the business while you are looking to investigate what the situation was and whether anything actually happened, or and carrying out your own investigation, again, that legal duty to refer has been met. If somebody has retired or decided to take redundancy and at the time when possibly you've made when you spoke to them, sorry, I've got a bit of a barky dog here, sorry. My apologies. If somebody has retired or been made redundant at the time where they were approached with the allegation, again, sometimes organisations may feel, okay, well, they've gone now, we don't need to worry about any issues, so we don't need to think about making that referral. Well, actually, that individual could go elsewhere, and that risk will still exist, and they will be bringing that risk to their new place of employment. So again, that duty to refer has been met, and it's similar with resignations as well. Often people will resign after they've been faced with an allegation. And again, sometimes employers will think, I don't need to worry about that anymore, then they've gone. Again, that risk will still exist, and because they can still go elsewhere to find a new job. And when that new employer sends out a DBS certificate, if the DBS doesn't know that this person is a concern or a risk, then obviously that new employer won't be given any information that also helps them to understand that either. So that's the first condition. The second condition is obviously that they've engaged in relevant conduct. And by that, we mean harm has been caused or harm could have been caused. So there was a situation where harm could have been caused, but maybe somebody stopped it. But essentially that is direct harm could have occurred or has occurred. What we mean by satisfied the harm test is that harm hasn't occurred yet, but there are serious concerns about the way this person is conducting themselves, or perhaps their behavior, or perhaps the way they're speaking about things that leads others to believe that harm could occur in the future. So for example, if somebody was having thoughts of a sexual nature about the people in their care, although they haven't done anything, there's a concern that harm could occur in the future. And finally, if you've received a conviction or caution for a relevant offence, again, that would be a reason for that second condition to also be met. But essentially, if you have removed somebody from regulated activity following a belief that they have caused harm, or they could cause harm in the future, or there are serious concerns about the individual and their conduct, then certainly a referral should be made to the DBS. And then the DBS will then make a decision as to whether that individual should be placed on the barred list or not. So that's barring. Actually, one thing I'm very quickly mention there as well is often, sometimes people come to us and they tell us why they haven't made a referral. So sometimes with all different agencies involved in the safeguarding investigation, even though you will have multiple agencies involved, it is still important to make that referral to the DBS, because sometimes, health may think social services will be making the referral, and social services will think the police are making the referral, and everyone thinks that somebody else is making the referral. But essentially, if that referral isn't made to the DBS, then the DBS won't know, and the DBS won't be able to play its part and take control of that situation in that respect. And often that's sometimes the reason why sometimes employers will come to me and they said, that we dismissed somebody, and then, and someone was investigated, but a few months down we've seen that they're working for another care agency, for example. So it is important that even if you feel that other organisations have made their referral to the DBS, please do still make it, because we'd rather have more than one referral for the same person than have nothing at all. So that is important. Another thing just to mention there as well is sometimes people will say to us, well, the police were involved and they decided to take no further action, so we thought, there's nothing else that the DBS could do. The threshold for the police and the Crown Prosecution's service is different to the DBS. So for the police and the Crown Prosecution, it's beyond reasonable doubt. But for the DBS, we have a balance of probability. It's more likely than not to have occurred. So there's no reason why the DBS wouldn't bar somebody, even if the police decide to take no further action. So just something else there to be aware of as well. But that essentially is barring, and that is when you should be making a referral to the DBS if you have removed somebody from regulated activity following a belief that they have caused harm, or they could cause harm in the future, or they have received a conviction or caution for relevant offence, then please do make that referral to the DBS. So I've got some useful links as well that I will obviously, I'm happy to share these slides if Peter would like, so you're more than welcome to have those, and some contact details as well. But essentially, as I said, so my role is obviously I'm a point of contact for anything to do with the DBS. So if you have any questions on what I've briefly mentioned here today in this very whistle-stop tour of the DBS, please do feel free to reach out. Obviously, this was a very, very quick presentation, but I do deliver longer, more in-depth presentations as well. So if there was a case of, you know, you want more questions or you've got a team that you feel could benefit from understanding a little bit more about the DBS process, whether that be the disclosure side or the barring side, or you've got questions that you just want somebody to answer, you know, by all means, you are welcome to get in touch and you know, it'd be great to work with you. But anything at all to do with DBS, anywhere where you feel that, you know, it'll be useful to have a chat or any type of involvement, please do let me know. And that's it from me. So I will stop sharing. And if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Excellent. Thank you, Karen. There are a couple of points in the chat. I'm not sure if you've noticed those. And one other thing that's been asked of me, and that's really around overseas workers, and it's particularly pertinent with refugee and asylum seekers, where it's difficult to get details and talking to their embassy. If they're an asylum seeker, the embassy is unlikely to be helpful. Yeah,
it's a difficult one. So unless they can give us some sort of documentation that helps to validate their identity, it's going to be very, very difficult. And from my understanding, it does make it more difficult for those who are considered to be asylum seekers or refugees. The only other way after that is to go down the fingerprint route, which essentially is where they would have to go to a local police station and provide fingerprints to validate their identity, which I appreciate isn't going to be the most encouraging way to do it. But unfortunately, that is how the law is at the moment, and there's not really much we can do about that. In terms of DBS checks for overseas applicants, not all countries will have obviously criminal record checks the way we do it, but they have different, they'll call it something else, or they'll have like I think it's like a certificate of good conduct or something, like they'll call it different things. The DBS does have a whole list of all of the countries and their embassy details. It would be about contacting those embassies directly and asking them about that information and how to access it. And that's the only other way of going around that, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. And the points in the chat.
Yeah, I'm just gonna have a quick look at those now. So if someone's on the barred list and someone does a standard DBS check on them, will they show on the conviction? No. So the only time you're going to see, so the question was, sorry, if somebody's on the barred list and they need to have a standard DBS check, will that information show? So on a standard DBS check, you will be given, you will be shown any spent and unspent convictions and cautions. Because the standard DBS check is not about the check against the barred list, that information, the barred list information will not show on a standard DBS check. The barred list information will only appear on the enhanced check with the barred, the enhanced DBS with the barred list check. And that's because in order to be able to access that enhanced DBS with the barred list check, you have to be in regulated activity, and regulated activity is something that somebody on the barred list cannot do. So for a standard DBS check, that information would not show. I hope that's okay, but if anyone has anything further than that, they're more than welcome to speak and let me know. And there was another question, is there an option for registered managers with CQC counter-signed DBS to use the update service? So with the update service, anybody can join it, but you do have to join it within 28 days of the issue number on your certificate. So you have to be quite quick on it. So there's no reason why a registered manager with CQC couldn't join the update service. They just have to make sure they register within the time frame.
Okay, and I think there's one more point in the chat now.
So yes, it was at what point do we carry out DBS for overseas candidates who come in with police checks? So you carry that out as you're doing your recruitment process and in the very initial stages. Obviously, there's no kind of legal requirement as to having to have that information from DBS applicants, from applicants from overseas. Obviously, it's good practice, and where you can get that information, that would be the best thing. But obviously, it's not always possible. So it's about making sure that the safer recruitment process includes trying to get as much information as you can do from your application, from references, have they worked anywhere else? What other information can you get from them? And also, bearing in mind that things like, probation periods as well, using those types of practices as well when it comes to actually employing the person as well. So it's where if you can get the information about them from an overseas embassy, then that would be great, but we appreciate that it's not always possible. So it's about using those other safer recruitment practices to help understand that individual and if there are any concerns. But you could certainly process that at the same time as you would do within the recruitment process. And what I will do is when I send the slides to you, Peter, I'll put a link in for those for the overseas applicants and the embassies.
Okay, great, because there's a lot of stuff, as I'm sure you're aware, going on at the moment. Recruitment is very difficult across social care, and we get asked quite a lot of questions, so we do try and refer people on. And I think Dolapo, have you got a further question?
Yes, please. Yes, for the carers on the sponsorship visas.
I'm really sorry, you can't hear you properly.
There's a requirement for them to come in with police checks from their countries, which they are all doing. Most of them. Oh, sorry. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Hi. Yeah, we can hear you. So
hear
it's just breaking up a little bit.
Can you hear me now?
We can. I think it was your question about, is there a requirement for care workers?
No. There's a requirement from the Home Office for them to come in with police checks, which expires after 6 months. Do we wait for the expiration of the 6 months before we do the DBS check, or do we do it as soon as they come?
I'm really sorry, Dolapo, we can't seem to hear. It keeps breaking up, I'm afraid.
Kiran, I think the question was relating to international individuals who come in with their home police checks, and ultimately then there is a requirement, or at what point, I believe that Dolapo's question was, at what point do we conduct a DBS? Is it after the 6-month expiry of their local police check? Certainly for me, I've done one as soon as I can type thing, as soon as they've got here, just for peace of mind. But I guess your steer may well be different.
I mean, yeah, no, you can. So if they've already come to the country with a police check, obviously that police check will be relevant to the time they spent in the country that they've just come from. The DBS check will only be relevant for the time that they have spent in the UK.
I don't know.
So it would be up to you basically. So as an organisation, whether you choose to do the DBS check as soon as you employ them, or whether you would prefer to do it when their relevant check expires, whether you want to do it.
Peace of mind, isn't it, really?
Fine as well.
Yeah.
That would be a decision for you to make based on your organisation and the the risk and stuff that you feel may be associated with that. And
it does seem a bit pointless though, doesn't it?
Sorry.
It does seem a bit difficult though, doesn't it, Kiran, when you've kind of got someone who's probably landed 2 weeks ago, and you're doing a criminal check on someone who's been here 2 weeks. But look, at least you've done your due diligence and you've ticked a box, and I think arguably that's the mitigating risk that we try to accommodate. So yeah,
absolutely. So you said, I mean, I think if you put someone who's come in with some sort of police certificate, then I think that's a great stance compared to some employers who have to then search for that. So if they've got it, great. And then obviously you're going to do your own risk assessment as well. So you can always put those types of mitigations in place anyway. So maybe you wouldn't let them work alone for the first few weeks or something, and take it from there. And then at some point you will conduct your own DBS check as well. Absolutely. And the choice of when to do that is completely up to you. Just to bear in mind, obviously, if they've arrived and on day 1 and they've come with their police certificate, and you send out a DBS certificate on day 2, there's not really much time that they're spent here in the UK for us to give you information on. So maybe a case of you may do it on day 1, but then you may want to carry out another one 6 months or to a year later. But again, it is up to you and what you feel is best. But use those other safer recruitment practices as well to help and support your decisions and the process as well.
I think Karen makes a very good point. The key word there is risk. And from a CQC point of view, it's all about risk and risk assessment. And it's again, as was stated, about evidencing that you've done the best you can. And if something does go wrong, and these things do happen, then the right track has been entered into along that way. And I think there have been cases of people trying to get back into the UK who've been barred, etc. So, you know, better to check rather than not check. And I think we have a further question from me.
Yeah, thank you for this. Thank you so much, Kiran. That was really helpful. I was just going to share that when I have 2 international applicants that came that I tried to employ. And I remember when I just had my CQC monitoring, you know, I had a monitoring meeting with them. And one of the things they asked me, first question during risk assessment was DBS check. Even though I showed even while they were going through the file, and I said, listen, we were told not to, that from the Home Office requirement, you're supposed to do the DBS check. The police report they brought in lasted after 6 months, you know, and after 6 months was when but I was very happy that even at that, immediately before they started working with me, I still did the DBS. I just didn't know why. I wasn't just comfortable. And that was the first question I was asked. So I just want to buttress what you said. It's totally up to the manager, to the employer. I think it's better to just do the rightful things, the needful things you need to do, whether they're here. You could give them, like for me, I did it after about 3 weeks while I was still going through the recruitment process, training and all that. I still carried out my DBS, and that was the first question I was asked. So, you know, you can imagine if I had not done it, I think my heart would have come out of my throat, you know. But thank God for that. So I just want to share that, so that some people will think, I think it's better you be on the safe side.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Funmi.
Yeah.
Is that another question, Delapo, or another point?
No, sorry, it's a legacy hand, please.
Okay, legacy hand, right, okay, great stuff. Any more points on DBS? Okay, well, we will circulate the slides. And we will make the contact details available. If you don't want to ask directly, and sometimes people don't, then send the question to either Dudley or myself, and we will forward it and do it on that basis. And Kiran, many thanks for coming. Very useful, very interesting. And one point I would make to you all, there is concern about unregistered providers and unregistered staff. So if you hear about social care providers that you believe are not CQC registered or are working without registration, either contact CQC directly, or if you don't want to do that, contact us and we will pass those details on anonymously. We have done this before. Social care gets a lot of bad press and it needs all the help it can to be positive. So if you think something is not right, please tell us and we will check it out. Without any referral to yourselves, so no risk there. Many thanks.
No problem. Thank you so much, and yeah, thank you for having me. And as Peter said, you will have my details, and if anyone has any further questions, please do feel free to reach out. Otherwise, nice meeting you all, and enjoy the rest of your meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Right, I think we have Karen with us from UKHSA, HSA rather.
Hello. Hi. Yes.
Karen,
So,
good morning.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully it should be better than last time. I'm using my personal computer because I think the problem last time was my system from work. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have some slides or no slides?
I don't have any slides. I'm just here to answer questions. Now, I did get forwarded 3 questions from you. Would you like me to address those first, Peter?
Yeah, that makes a good start, please.
So the first question I'm going to look up because I'm also looking at my work computer, so it's not because I'm doing anything strange. So the first question was about COVID boosters for families and people working in social care. Now, with regard to booster vaccinations, the programme is still for people who are themselves at risk. unfortunately, there hasn't been a plan yet for the winter boosters. We're hoping that there'll be a winter booster program in tandem with the flu vaccination program, but actually we don't see that information until you do. But once I've got it, I will make sure it's forwarded to Peter, just to make sure that you've all got it. But at the moment, we don't know anything about the availability of boosters for care workers and for relatives, unfortunately. So that's just one of those things. The second question is about flu jabs. The winter programme for flu has already been published. It does include care workers. So they should be able to obtain flu vaccination. So yeah, so what it says is that vaccinations offered under the NHS programme will include people living in residential care homes. It will include anyone getting a carer's allowance, any frontline staff without employer-led occupational health schemes employed by a registered residential care or nursing home or a registered domiciliary care provider who are directly involved in the care of vulnerable patients or clients, and anybody working in a hospice as well will be included in the NHS scheme. So hopefully you should get some communications when the scheme starts about how you will access that. But I think last year it was just a case of showing a pay slip or an ID badge at your local pharmacy. So, but we'll get some more information about that. So that's kind of covered. We really want to encourage people to have flu vaccines this year. The last thing we want is dual outbreaks of COVID and flu, because that is going to be very difficult and it's not going to be very good for either yourselves or your residents. So we really need to kind of push the flu vaccines this year. I know it's been very difficult with vaccines, especially with the whole thing about it being made compulsory and then that program being reversed, which wasn't very positive. But we really need to encourage people to get flu vaccines this year, because indications from Australia is that they are having quite a nasty flu season, and we tend to go on what happens to them then comes to us in our winter, because it's their winter at the moment. So it's something we really want to make sure happens. The third question I've got is about polio. Now, so what's actually happened is that basically we do wastewater testing. So testing is done of sewage, and they look for particular organisms. So this is one of the ways that they've managed to identify places that have had high levels of COVID. Polio is one of the viruses they look for, and in northeast London they found some polio virus that is related to the oral vaccine version. Okay, so because you remember the old sugar lump polio virus, you take it on a sugar lump. We don't use that anymore in this country. The fact that it's present means that it's somebody who's been vaccinated abroad, and there's slight genetic changes showing that it's been transmitted between people. However, we've had no illness. So it's just a concern that it's been found, but there have been no cases of illness at this point. So it's just a watching wait. With regard to people who haven't had their polio boosters, they are quite entitled to go to their GP and talk about boosters and see if they're eligible. Okay. Nowadays we use an injected vaccine, so it will be part of general boosters. So it can be combined with boosters for tetanus as well, and diphtheria, because there are, not in this country, but in Australia, we've had a couple of cases of diphtheria as well. So we really want to make sure everybody's vaccinated. So please, if you've got any staff that are worried, they're quite entitled to go to their GPs and discuss their status and ask for boosters. That is quite a reasonable thing to do. Just as a general citizen, not even necessarily as a care worker. So just want everybody to be as up to date as possible. Shall I go to the chat and see if there's any questions there?
Yeah, I think there's a couple. One point I would just make on the going to people with it, or people rather going to their GP. What we found from a previous exercise, there's quite a lot of social care staff weren't registered with a GP, which was why they were using, walk-in clinics or A&E, and we obviously tried to encourage them to register with the GP, but part of the issue, Karen, was that they tended to have relatively short lets on rental properties and moved. So, I mean, are the jabs available as a walk-in, or would they have to register with the GP?
I think they will need to register with a GP. I don't think that's the sort of thing a walk-in centre would do, because it's like planned care, isn't it? It's not an emergency. So yeah, they would have to register with the GP. And you can temporarily register with the GP. So you can say, I'm only here for a couple of months, and sign on with that GP as a temporary resident.
Right, okay. There's a question in the chat. If you do not have residents but conduct home care, will the workforce be eligible for flu vaccine?
It does say domiciliary care, and it does say personal assistance as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah.
I think that in many ways it's more important that, not that it's not important that those in res situations get vaccinated, but if you think about it, those working for DCAs move around. They may well see several different people every day. So they have links into the community as well. So they're perhaps at greater risk of going down with the flu or coming across it. So and we always have this problem with getting people across social care inoculated. I don't quite know when the programme is going to start, but the sooner it starts, the better. The more information we've got, the better.
Yeah, it usually starts in about September. So just to catch everybody, but we'll have to see when it's rolled out. So
okay. Further questions for the UKHSA? Karen, please. They're very quiet.
Anything, I really don't mind. It can be about anything. So yeah.
I think it's a pretty valuable opportunity to question Karen about things that are going on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite happy to come back if anything comes up that anybody thinks about later, or even correspond by email. That's absolutely fine. Peter's got my email address. So if you have any other questions that you suddenly think that you need, you can always send them to Peter, who can send them on to me. So
okay. Yeah. I think one thing that is is an issue, but people probably aren't wanting to raise is the difficulty of getting staff to be inoculated, whether it's for flu or for COVID or for basically anything, and whether we can do something about myth busting, because I've had a couple of people say to me, oh, well, we've had malaria, so we can't get COVID. Really?
Yeah, I think that's probably arisen because of the whole story about hydroxychloroquine being effective against COVID, which it isn't. It was proposed and it's been studied a lot, and it has been found not to be effective against COVID, but it's one of the first line things for malaria. So therefore, I think that it's two issues being put together.
Okay.
Having had malaria does not give you immunity against COVID, and having had treatment for malaria does not give you immunity against COVID. So that's a myth.
Okay, fantastic. I think perhaps we could do with a bit of myth busting. But it is, I know from a lot of people don't like inoculations, and there are various other issues around that, but we really do need to encourage staff and managers in that sense to be inoculated. And if anyone's got any great suggestions or they have done things that work, please let us know. We will put them together and we will circulate them amongst your friends and colleagues, because they are really very useful. And I know that some of you have had a great attempt and done some really good work on getting your staff jabbed and inoculated.
Yeah. I mean, I used to work in hospital infection control, amongst other things, and we always had huge drives with our staff. And some people just were so resistant that we couldn't do it. But I mean, some trusts have tried doing things like telling people if they refuse their flu jab and then they go off sick with flu, they're not getting paid. But I don't think that was legal, because there was a legal challenge to it, and it was struck down. But it's really difficult. Colleagues of mine have tried things like having tea parties, so you get a free piece of cake if you have your jab. Free coffee, all sorts of things.
That might not be a bad idea, holding it in a Costa, so you get your Costa free if you've had your jab, but who knows? Yeah. Fund Me, did you have a question?
Yes, please. Excuse me. Sorry. Thank you so much, Karen. I just want to share this. I have this employee, a very good care worker, but during the time everyone was having the vaccination, for whatever reason, she just refused to be vaccinated. So, and it was a bit difficult. All efforts to convince her did not work. She just felt her parents told her it's not safe, blah, blah, blah. Showed her all the leaflets, everything. Made her know when everybody took theirs, there was no serious, it wasn't bad. They are not dead now. She was told some people would turn to monsters. And I was like, we're still here. We've had it over 2 months, but at that time, we had not, but every effort to convince her that, listen, we're not monsters, we're still human beings. She didn't take it. So what I went on to do was, I had to deal with that. I said, well, for you to continue with the company, every Friday, you have to come into the office to be tested for COVID. And she agreed. So every Friday up to now, and she has to make sure she uses all the PPE. I do a lot of spot checks on her. Thank God for that. She hasn't had COVID, but she's one person I monitor so much. I do spot checks on her just to make sure she uses all the PPE. She's always double masked, because those were the conditions, because I gave her those two options. Because for your own belief or whatever reason why you don't want to take the vaccine, I respect that, but you have to respect the people you're taking care of and the people you're working with too. So that's the condition. So I'm just trying to share this in case anyone has a difficult person like that as well. But it gives you a lot of work, because I had to go out myself to do spot checks on her to make sure she has all the complete PPE, she uses everything every time. And so far, we've been lucky. We've not had, any incident of COVID, and she's not tested positive as well. So I don't know if there's any other thing you can do to such a person. I don't know. Is there any advice from you, Karen? Because sometimes she just keeps my heart keep beating so hard.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how people become really ingrained in these beliefs? Because surely she can see that all her colleagues have been vaccinated and they're all absolutely fine.
Yeah. She just has this belief that she was going to turn into a monster. I don't know where she got that from. And I'm like, you knew me before the vaccine. I got the 2 vaccines. I got the booster. I'm still here. Is there anything that's changed? Is my hair or my skin turning into a monster? I don't know. But she just has that thing. You know what beliefs can do to people. But, you know, she doesn't even realize the extra job she gives me. I go on spot checker like 3 times a week because I can't sleep. I keep thinking, oh my God, let this girl. But so far, we've been lucky. What advice do you have for me? Do you think I should continue putting myself under that pressure? You know, because it's like a pressure for me, which she doesn't realize. And you don't want to see as, you don't want to be seen as being, you know, criticizing or victimizing her because she refused the vaccine. So sometimes it could be a very difficult situation. And she's a very good care worker as well. So is there any other thing one can do? Because honestly, it's really draining me out going to spot checker every time. It's like she's the only staff I have. And she's not. You know, you have to make sure she has the PP. Every time I'm on her, she's becoming a bit irritable about it. But, you know, I have to keep making her understand, listen, I need to do that to save people's lives. So it could be difficult. I don't know if there's any other special thing you think I can do.
To be honest, no, there isn't. Apart from actually trying to convince her, and having spent a long time like trying to convince people to get their children vaccinated against measles and all that kind of thing, it is really difficult to shift ingrained beliefs, even if those beliefs are incorrect. So I think that you need to do what you think makes everybody safe. I would slightly dispute double masking, to be perfectly honest. But you know, everybody's meant to be wearing their PPE anyway. So yeah, what can you do? The only thing I would say is technically if you're putting a bit of a spotlight on her, there could be, you know, she could eventually raise a grievance and say you're bullying her because she won't.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's whatever you think you need to do to be safe, really. I really don't know how you shift people's ingrained beliefs like this, apart from saying, look at all your colleagues. Have any of them turned into monsters? Because it's not rational, is it, sometimes?
Yeah.
I think it's very difficult, and in a way your colleague is fortunate that she has got you checking up on her. But the comments around bullying, etc., are potentially correct. I'm aware of other providers who have done similar things, and also that they have engineered staff out of the system because they've been difficult to manage, or simply, when they're on 0 hours, not given them any hours. So they've decided to go and work somewhere else. And one of the concerns there is that potentially there are some, I would guess, DCAs who have a largely unvaccinated workforce, which could become a centre for problems because those people that have refused to be vaccinated have gravitated to one or more suppliers. And that's not good news. We're aware that some providers have had success with getting their staff vaccinated by working with local cultural leaders, local social group leaders. They're people of influence, because we had an interesting case where the guy at the church was very pro-vaccine, and he talked to a lot of the staff, and bingo, all of a sudden people were going off and getting their jabs done, whereas previously they'd all been absolutely resistant and had said they'd leave rather than get their jabs. This was in the run-up to the compulsory jabs. So it's just a question of keeping trying, and I guess with some people they aren't going to do what they're not going to do, frankly, so you just have to move on.
Can I just address this question from Dawn? So she said, why are we deeming people's decision to not get take the vaccine to be incorrect because there are a lot in the NHS that are not vaccinated. Is the perception the same for them? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Basically, the vaccine is offered to make life safer for everybody, to make life safer for the staff and for the clients. And it's been proven to work. There's been loads and loads of research on it to work. And so, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it is a personal choice, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it's an evidence-based choice. So, you know, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that the personal choice thing is you know, an interesting one, and of course we all make choices every day. One of the managers who used to come to these meetings and are used to actually speak and be a very useful part of the meetings, she's now left the profession because her sister, who refused to have any vaccines, became very ill, having got COVID, and she needs 24/7 care now. Okay, it's a one-off. It's a very sad situation. She was a very good, experienced registered manager, and also a nurse as well. And she couldn't persuade her own sister to have the vaccine. So it's a it's a difficult situation, and I don't think we're going to resolve it anytime soon. But as has been pointed out, you know, the boosters will be coming round, and you know, please do take those and encourage your staff to have them as well, and the flu jabs as well. And we go through this every year.
And I think the argument with the boosters is, if you look at the childhood vaccination schedule, so babies have their triple jab at 8 weeks, at 12 weeks, at 16 weeks, then they have another booster a bit later and another booster at preschool. That is the program, because that is what it takes to get ingrained immunity. And that is exactly what's happening here. And this has happened with every vaccine. As it's introduced, we find out how vaccine declines, how immunity declines. So when the measles vaccination was first introduced in 1968, it was a single vaccination. It was then worked out that actually some people, it doesn't quite cover everybody, and that's why the MMR is now a 2-dose regimen. Most people get full immunity after 1 dose, but there are a few people who don't, and there are some people who just don't respond at all. But that's the thing. And I see your question about your father having side effects from the booster. Obviously, I can't comment on that. Very sorry to hear that. I think part of the issue with the vaccine is that, obviously, if you've got if you've got a side effects profile, because everything has side effects. Okay, so you know, some people react badly to various things. I can't have a smallpox vaccine because I have quite bad eczema. And if I had a smallpox vaccine, I would have very bad side effects. So, you know, all vaccines, all medicines have side effects. I think the thing is that because you've got a lot of people being vaccinated at the same time, millions of people, even if you've got a chance of serious side effects of 0.1%, that's a lot of people when you're vaccinating 1 million people as opposed to 100 people. So it's all to do with perception. I obviously can't comment on any side effects that people are reporting, because that would be up to medical teams to decide what was actually a side effect of vaccination or not. So it is all to do with perception and what you actually see.
Okay, thank you, Karen. I'm sure we all share sympathy with Dawn with the situation with her father. Any more questions for Karen? If you've got anything that you want to pass on, please send it to me, and we will pass it on. We'll get an answer back to you. And I'd see another question, another point. Some care workers feel they've already had the 2 vaccine and there's no point in getting the boosters, as some of them then got COVID after. They believe that they wouldn't get COVID after vaccination.
Yeah, that's not the case. What the vaccine actually does is it means that you're much less likely to get serious COVID. You're much less likely to get long COVID. You're much less likely to get hospitalised, and you're much less likely to die from COVID. So it's like, you know, sometimes if you have a flu vaccine, even if it's the right strain, you might get flu, but you might only get it for a couple of days as opposed to being ill for 2 to 3 weeks. Yeah, it's about attenuating the infection, but it will protect you against some infection, especially if it's very close to your vaccine. I mean, I've had 3 vaccines, and I had COVID in February, and I actually wasn't that ill. So, no, it's just different people and how they react.
Yeah, I mean, I think many of us, I've also had all the jabs and had COVID, and was, interestingly, my wife is a type 1 diabetic. I was generous enough to pass it on to her, which was a concern. And my infection with COVID was much worse than hers. You know, it would have actually didn't really affect her doing anything at all. I mean, she couldn't go out, of course, which made her unhappy. But I was much worse than she was, and I'm, you know, in theory, perfectly fit and have no medication at all. So it does affect people very differently. On that note, anything else for Karen, or we'll move on?
Okay, thank you very much for having me. And like I say, quite happy to answer questions afterwards if you send them to Peter, or to come back and do another session, another Q&A session.
Oh, hang on. Is this something else that's come up? Yeah. Yes, that's probably not really Karen's area. The issue of working with clients that've got COVID, but due to the funding stopping now, care workers don't want to work with clients with COVID. There have been representations with regard to people not getting funding for staying off work with COVID, and that has got us nowhere, frankly. I mean, have you got any additions to that, Karen? Or
no, not really. You know, the scientists in UKHSA do make their opinions known, which we are not allowed to have access to, but I'm sure that there have been, you know, decisions made and things that are just, you know, some of them are financial, some of them are scientific, some of them are a combination of the two. But I'm not quite sure. But you see, you could argue exactly the same for a client with any infectious disease. Yeah. So
we have, LCAS is a member of a national body. We also have a direct link with the DH and CQC. We've talked to them. These things tend to go off, I guess, to the Treasury, et cetera, and the Treasury, it seems to me that their default position is no, and then they may do something. I think someone just made a point about polio in the chat.
Yeah, let me just find them for you. I think it'd probably be easier if I post this. So it starts off as a mild respiratory illness, and then it can advance on to more serious. So paralytic polio doesn't happen in every case. So yeah, sorry, I've just lost
Might it be useful to send that on to us, or to send us the link and we'll pass it on?
Yeah, that would be fine. It's actually on the NHS site anyway, so yeah.
Okay, we'll circulate that.
Yeah, I'll just pop it in the chat anyway, because I've got it.
Great stuff.
So but yeah, that actually describes what the symptoms are. Like I say, not everybody who gets polio goes on to get paralytic polio, but it's one of the more serious effects of it, and it does affect children far worse than it does adults. So
one of my late brother had polio and had virtually no effect, and a friend of ours of a similar age, and Janet has very badly damaged ankles and walks very poorly, and that was down to polio.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
A random disease, frankly.
Yes, it is. Yes. I can remember working with people. I very early in my nursing career, I worked in a care home, and actually, having to put braces on people's legs and things where they'd been affected younger. So yeah.
Okay, thanks again, Karen, and we'll move on, and we'll be back in contact with you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, what I'd like to do now is I've got a few skills for care slides which are actually quite pertinent, and I'll share these with you. Unfortunately, neither Selena or Laura were available today, so as I say, I will share the slides with you and run through some notes. Right, can I just check? Okay. Right, hopefully everybody can see those slides. Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, great stuff.
Yes,
Thank
we
you.
can.
Okay, great stuff. Let's just move on to the next one. Okay, recruitment is a big issue at the moment. You don't need me to tell you that. And Skills for Care have got a safe and fair recruitment guide to employing people with convictions, how you can employ them in social care. So again, that relates directly back to what was said earlier on today. And there's a guide, you can pull that up, and we will give you the contact details for Skills for Care. So if you've got any queries, then do go back to them. Laura, Selena, all the other Skills for Care people are very available and very good at answering your questions. Just a quick question. Is there anybody with us today from Skills for Care? I think one of the new employees recently taken on was going to join us. Not that I'm going to put you on the spot, but just, you're very welcome if you are here. Next, a guide to support employers with criminal record checks from overseas. This is absolutely what was discussed earlier today. A guide is being put together. We know that the DH and CQC are getting questions. These have been going on to the Home Office. We have been going around in a bit of a circle getting information for you, but it's great news that Skills for Care have been able to put something together which will be freely available and which will be straightforward and understandable. And I'm pretty sure that will include refugees and asylum seekers. And those are two areas that come up time and again. We will make sure that we get the information we can for you, but do please keep asking questions. You are the providers, you are the employers. You tell us what you want to know. We will try and chase up the answers. I accept the answers can take a while to appear, but we are doing our best. The next one, there's an upcoming webinar about maximising recruitment. This is on July the 18th in the afternoon, and it's in partnership with Neil Eastwood. He's got some great ideas. I'd also say to you that if you're busy running a business, your expertise is in care, probably not recruitment. Quite a number of people have turned to organisations such as Purple Tribe, and they've outsourced their recruitment, and they've done that successfully. and that may well work for you. So if you want to give it a go, talk to Purple Tribe, you know, and bring any information back to your colleagues. Forefront's a new program. It's partly designed to appeal more to the BAME workforce, and particularly for those looking to make their first steps rather on the way to leadership. Leadership's always been an issue with social care, and you can get some funding from the Workforce Development Fund for this. Just briefly on the subject of workforce development, we're having a particular event on September the 8th, I think it's September the 8th, with regard to being able to access Skills for Care workforce development. We'll circulate the details of that. Workforce development is a very useful way of supporting your training budget. And I would also point out that training and making that work properly and linking it through your system, your processes, is going to be a key part of CQC inspections. Okay, well-being. You're all aware of Keeping Well South East London, you're all aware of Keeping Well North West London, etc. Very useful portals that are getting really good hits. Please keep passing that information to your staff, and Skills for Care are now getting involved in wellbeing resources. Again, there will be ability to claim some funding for these. There'll be some prizes. It's really useful stuff. Looking after your staff's well-being keeps them in your employ. Retention is vital, absolutely vital. And last but by no means least, the contact details for Laura and for Selena, which we will put all these on the website very shortly. Okay, any questions about Skills for Care, please? Okay, you've had difficulty contacting Purple Tribe. Right, let me see if I can find some contact details quickly. Okay, I've just put the phone details on the email for Sienna Matthews, who works for Purple Tribe, in the chat. So hopefully that might be of use to you. I've also put the details in there for contacting Dudley or myself. And there's a couple of other things I'm going to drop in there as well. You'll probably, let me just this one in. There's a South London partnership have got, and it's actually only tomorrow afternoon, Thursday afternoon, they're looking for people to be part of a health and care industry focus group. I know you're all tight for time, but we really do need to get people to be part of these. And there's something else I'll drop in, which is around a Care International Conference from Namaste. Many of you will know Namaste and may well have been part of that before. Again, we'll circulate that through WhatsApp and through the website, but it's really good to get people to attend these things. As I say, we've got a WDF meeting in September, on September the 8th, and we're planning a meeting, a face-to-face meeting on the 21st of September at Croydon Town Hall. So we'll again circulate that. Just a point. Okay, yep. Funmi, you have a question, I think.
Yeah, I just want to say, not really pertinent. I just want to ask you, because a lot of times the skills for care, they send training, invitation to me for care providers and things like that. And I try to contact them to find out, is it free? Is it something that one can be doing with them ongoing? Because a lot of those don't get the care certificate training and the basic care free. And since you're registered, you're with the skills for care, I just want to know, could you find out, is this something we can do with them continuously? Is it, I just want to know, because I tried to email them, but I didn't get anybody that came back to me on training from skills for care.
Okay, what I would suggest is contacting Laura Anthony, and her slides rather contain her information, so that's there.
Yeah.
And I'll just dig her email address. And is John Buttle still with us? John?
Yes, I am.
Oh, hello, John.
Hi.
Might you be able to pick that question up whilst I sort out Laura's email address?
Sorry, just remind me.
Funmi, give it a go.
Oh, I said, sorry about that. I said, you know, the skills for care, yeah, they're very helpful. They send you a lot of emails to update you about things.
Yeah.
But the question I want to ask is about training. Sometimes they invite you for some training. So I'm trying to ask a question like, is this something we can register for our carers, something that will be ongoing? Do they provide a service whereby we can have an ongoing training with them, or can I book a training with them? You know, things like that, instead of getting it from HSG.
The answer is yes and no. Skills for Care administer a workforce development fund that is money given to them by the Department of Health. Every year, the Department of Health seems somehow to find that the start of the new financial year comes as a surprise.
Okay.
So you get this period that we're in now, where you've got a couple of months where they have finished the previous financial year, which finished 31st of May, and we're just waiting for the funding for the new one to be released and announced.
Okay.
There doesn't seem to be any problem with it, but if you're new to working with the Workforce Development Fund, it means you've got to wait until that new fund is released so that you can join an employer partnership or do the paperwork to claim direct. The way it then works, you have training providers like ourselves who work with employers using that funding. And for example, in terms of ongoing training, we've got customers we've been working with for about, well, nearly 10 years probably, who will train all of their new care staff using that funding. So we use the funding that comes through for a level 2 RQF in medication, which is a really great short course.
Yeah, something like that I would really love.
Yeah. And then we use the funding from that as well to subsidize during the care certificate knowledge on top of it.
Okay.
And we do that, we have a cohort starting every Thursday where we do the meds on the Thursday, Friday, and then the care certificate knowledge on the Monday, Tuesday. And that's been ongoing for years. We also, like other training providers are available, I mustn't be selfish, but we have access. We're an endorsed provider with Skills for Care, which means that we can offer all of their management training fully funded as well. So as I speak, we've got a group of managers from around London and the South East doing a well-led management course. This afternoon, we've got a Lead to Succeed. We do little one-day CPD things on things like performance management and workplace culture. We also work with Skills for Care funding for a level 2 dementia awareness and a level 2 autism awareness.
Okay.
The thing is that apart from the endorsed qualifications, Skills for Care currently will only be funding RQF qualifications. So we have to cherry pick the ones that are deliverable with the funding value over a short enough period that it makes sense for employers as well.
Oh, okay. Okay,
But,
when did you say this is going to start?
well, at the moment, all of the partnerships that administer the funding on behalf of groups of employers, they have all put in their tender applications for the funding for this now 22-23 financial year.
Okay.
They should be hearing from Skills for Care in the next week or so, really, as to whether they're successful or not. Then they can open their partnerships to new members. You will have you come across the adult social care data set before?
Adult social care, what? Say that again.
The adult social care data set used to be called the NMDS.
No, adult social care.
It's one of the hoops you have to jump through to get the funding. And
oh, data set, okay.
Yeah, and it's basically Skills for Care want you to go to this website. It collects lots of information about you as a provider and basic information about your staff.
Oh, okay.
No personal details about staff are seen by Skills for Care. It all gets converted via an algorithm, but it does mean that they're able to then say to the Department of Health, you know, this is the size of the social care workforce, these are the types of jobs that people, so it's valuable information for them. It will take you a little time to enter your details on the system.
Okay.
But if you're a smaller organization, it's pretty quick and straightforward. That's reasonably fair to say, isn't it, Peter?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And once you've done that, you can apply for the funding. But I know, I mean, I'll probably be running a seminar for people who are new to it as soon as we know that the funding's been announced. Okay. And I'll be sending out invites to that via Peter as well.
Okay.
But yeah, it all works. There's a few little hoops, a few little procedures. Okay. There is in everything. There is also a mysterious tender that's out at the moment for £150 million worth of social care training. And we are waiting to see who's won the bid for that. I think everyone is hoping Skills for Care will do, because obviously they're the people that know the sector best. But whoever wins it, there will be, you know, this rather large pot of money that people can access. And as soon as we know any more, obviously, as a trading provider, we'll be finding out what we can and letting people know.
Okay. Thank you very much for that.
We got there.
There've been a few. I've put John's details in the chat. We do have this event solely around Workforce Development Fund on September the 8th, and John will be there as well, along with partnerships, by which time we hope that the Treasury will have released the money to via the DH to Skills for Care. It's only halfway through the financial year. And just coming back to the points about training, I had a meeting yesterday about dementia training involving social care and primary care. And the lead person, the quote was that most of the dementia care offered was crap. It wasn't fit for purpose. And she was quite forthright, which she's very good at. And it's something that, you know, is going to be right up there for being inspected with CQC and local authority quality monitoring teams. John.
Yeah, also on a similar theme, people may have been having emails from Skills for Health, Skills for Care, CQC about autism and learning disability training.
Yeah.
It's become mandatory for everyone working with people with a learning disability or who are neuroatypical to be required to undertake training. This actually came in last Friday. So, but the difficulty is, this is now a requirement, but the project to put together the training material and how it's going to work probably isn't going to finish for another 12 months. So Skills for Care and Skills for Health are asking CQC to not be too rigorous on implementing that requirement. But at the same time, everyone like ourselves is looking at what we can do in terms, because basically they're dividing it into 3 tiers. So depending on your involvement in working with people with learning disabilities or autism, there will be a different scale of training that you're required to do. We don't know whether this is going to be funded. And if it is, it probably won't be for another 6 to 12 months before we know. But please, if you're working with people who have autism or have learning disabilities, please do be aware that you will start to need looking at how to make sure that you can demonstrate your staff have been trained, even if it's not to the full extent of the new legislation.
Yeah, and if many of you working in that sector will be aware of the CQC document, Right Support, Right Culture.
Yeah.
And that is being reviewed by Debbie Ivanova, one of the very senior people at CQC. It's something she leads upon. And her basically the premise was that when they start to inspect those homes, those social care providers in that area, if the staff are not sufficiently trained, then their registration will be removed. And this is, I guess one could say this is partly the fault of the sector, because many people have jumped on the bandwagon thinking it was a better funded area of care without having properly trained staff. So it's going to come back and bite a few people on the backside, unfortunately. And training, training is one of those areas that during COVID has been somewhat put on the back burner and is now being pulled very much back to the front, to the fore.
Yeah.
Juliet, did I see a hand raised there?
No, not at all, Peter.
Okay. Right. Any other queries or questions, and we'll let you go.
It was really nice. Thank you.
Okay. Well, many thanks. And John, thanks for those points. And
thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter.
Stay well.
Thank you, Peter.
Everyone. And we'll be in touch. All the best. Cheers now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
That's right. Once Emma has actually